Michigan took down Alabama in the Rose Bowl, and at one point, I thought Alabama had this thing won. They were up 2013 late in the fourth quarter. All of a sudden, J.J. McCarthy leads Michigan downfield, and they tied the game, and it goes into overtime. And this was a really non-Alabama-like game because Nick Saban got out-coached by Jim Harbaugh. There's no way you can play in the toughest conference in all of college football, win the SEC title game, and still not have a center that knows how to properly snap the damn football, bro. There were so many bad snaps in this game that I lost count at 5. And it was a major reason why Bama lost. Another reason why Alabama lost is that their offensive line played like dog shit, man. And I don't get why Alabama didn't decide to run the football a lot more. Like, they came out in this game trying to throw the ball, and it made no sense to me because that's not the strength of your team. At best, Jalen Milroe should have only had to throw the football 18 times in this game. Their offensive line gave up 6 sacks, man. Like, anytime they asked him to drop back to throw, he was getting thrown on the ground, man. Michigan was sending pressure, getting home, and when they were even rushing forward, they were still getting home on Alabama's offensive line. And this offensive line has been an issue for the Crimson Tide for the last 3 to 4 years. When is Nick Saban going to get this shit corrected? You can't expect to win another national title until your offensive line is able to play at an elite level. We saw what Washington did against Texas. They gave up 0 sacks against one of the better pass rushes in America. And another thing that really irritated me with Alabama in this game is that their last play in overtime was really idiotic. Like, everybody knew Jalen Milroe was going to get the football. So why would you run it up the middle with him? Wouldn't it have made more sense to try to get him outside? You know, maybe try to call a quarterback counter to get him out to the edge. Because if Michigan was killing you all game with their defensive line obliterating your O-line up front, why are you going to think that nobody's going to expect you to run a QB power up the middle with him and that it was going to work? Like, that play call from Tommy Rees was absolutely ridiculous. And you got to give a lot of credit to Michigan because barely anybody at all picked Michigan to win this game. Majority of bettors had their money on Michigan losing, and the majority of bettors also took Alabama with the under. This is something that many Big Ten fans have been hoping would happen for a very long time. And it finally happened. Jim Harbaugh finally broke through, and they finally dethroned the SEC. And this is the first time in damn near a decade that we're going to have a national championship without the SEC. And I'm all for it. Michigan outplayed Alabama. Where I was really wrong at was when I said that this game was going to be evenly matched from a talent standpoint. And it obviously wasn't. From the get-go, Michigan was the better team. And if it wasn't for that mishap that they had early in the first quarter with that fumbled punt, I strongly doubt Alabama would have even been able to get the 20 points in this game because Michigan's defense, they had a fantastic afternoon against Alabama's offense. And Alabama, they were a one-dimensional team. Michigan, they had success running the football, although they didn't have the kind of game that they've had in the past. When it comes to their efficiency running the ball, they were really good at it when they needed to be. Blake Corum, he was the unsung hero of this game. Everybody singing their praises to J.J. McCarthy, but you got to give a lot of props to how Blake Corum played. He made some big plays. He had a couple of big catches. He had that big 17-yard run, which pretty much iced the game in OT. You see, whoever was going to be the winner of this game, it was going to come down to who could play a more complementary style of football. And Michigan was able to do that. They had success throwing the football with J.J. McCarthy. He didn't have the greatest game, in my opinion, but he was good enough to get them to win. He was getting outside the pocket, extending plays. He had a couple of big ones as well. He had like a 16-yard run late, which helped them drive the football downfield. Alabama, their passing attack was abysmal. And after watching this game, I'm starting to wonder if Alabama is even going to have Jalen Milroe starting next season. Yes, the dude made a lot of improvement throughout the course of this year, but is he good enough to lead you to another SEC title with how tough this conference is going to be in 2024 with Oklahoma and Texas arriving on the scene? If you can even be able to get to 200 yards passing in today's age of college football, that's a problem. Jalen Milroe is a really good athlete. He had some electric runs, but he didn't have too many electric throws. He didn't have a lot of big throws downfield that we've seen him make the majority of this season. The offensive line didn't do him no favors. I mean, when you're getting sacked as soon as you get the football, that's a problem. Of course, you're not going to have a lot of success throwing that thing, but there were moments when he did have some protection and he couldn't deliver in the passing game for Alabama. Look, Nick Saban, around this time last year, said that he wanted to go back to the basics. He wanted to go back to playing physical defense and having a physical offense that isn't just overly reliant on the passing game. But in 2024, if you can't have a quarterback that can make the necessary throws when needed, how are you going to ever be able to win another national title? It's a passing game. Michigan, we know what they like to do. They like to run the football. That's their bread and butter. But they didn't have to overly rely on it for winning this game. Meanwhile, for Alabama, the only time they had success offensively was when they were able to run the football. Michigan, if it wasn't for the special teams mishaps that they had, they probably would have won this game way more convincingly than what they did. And you got to give a lot of credit to the offensive coaching staff of Michigan. Some of the plays and schemes that they were running were confusing Alabama's defense. There was a moment early in the first half when Alabama, their defense went to the sideline and Nick Saban was coaching them up, telling them, hey, man, like, you got to communicate. You got to be able to keep up with the motions. There were a lot of things that Michigan was doing offensively from a schematic standpoint that gave Alabama's defense a lot of problems. You know, for this to be a Nick Saban coach team, they didn't really look all that well coached in this game, and yet they still had a chance to win it. And if Alabama would have won this thing, I would have said that this is the worst national championship Alabama team that Saban has ever had throughout this era. And he has done a fantastic job coaching this team up to this point. If any other coach was coaching Alabama football this year, I don't even think they would have won 10 games. And yeah, we know Alabama recruits at a really high level every single season, but Michigan, they were the better team on both sides of the football, minus special teams. Special teams is what killed them in this game. And you know, I would have thought that Alabama would have done the complete opposite. I was thinking that Alabama was going to come into this game, their defense was going to be able to shut down Michigan's rushing attack, and that they were going to be able to put Michigan in a situation where they would have to overly rely on J.J. McCarthy to lead them to the win. And that never happened. There was never a single point in this game when Michigan wasn't able to do what they've been doing all season long. They still been able to do what got them here. And meanwhile, for Alabama, this was a team that outside of the run game, they had no identity on offense. Bama's identity all season long up to this game has been, you know, getting some big plays in the passing game here and there with Jalen Milroe, with how well he throws the deep ball, relying on his athleticism in the run game, and also your other running backs, and only throwing the football when need be. But in this game, Michigan really put Alabama against the wall because the rushing attack, if that thing wasn't working and they had to put it in the air, they had no success at all. You can say the offensive line was the main reason for that, but we got to put a lot of the blame on Jalen Milroe. Nick Saban, if I'm him, I'm hitting the transfer portal ASAP, and I'm getting another quarterback up in there to give Jalen Milroe some competition. Or hopefully one of the younger quarterbacks that they have coming up from their prior recruiting classes are good enough to push him for the starting job. I don't know if him at quarterback is a sustainable formula for Bama to have success in 2024. I mean, this dude was terrible in this game, and he wasn't even all that great in the SEC championship. But J.J. McCarthy, he was miles better than what Jalen Milroe was in this game. Michigan had the big quarterback advantage. And when you have a quarterback advantage, that's normally key to you being able to pull off the win. There were times when J.J. McCarthy made some big throws with the pocket collapsing that really impressed me. Michigan, for them to get this win was really impressive to me because I don't think too many people expected them to pull off this victory against Nick Saban. You know, Jim Harbaugh, he's come up short in the past. This is his first time actually making it to a national title. And with how good of a coach he is, you would have thought that he's been to more national championships. This is somebody who made it to a Super Bowl, took the 49ers to 3 straight NFC championship games. He turned around Stanford football, made them somewhat of a powerhouse in a sense before he departed. And then he goes back to Michigan, and he finally is able to break through with everything that this program had going on this season, with the whole sign stealing scandal. And rather you care about it or not, this team took what could have been a distraction and used it as motivation to continue to find ways to win games. Michigan versus everybody, I didn't really care about the whole motivation tactic that they used because you got caught cheating. But I got to give them props for being able to rally behind that situation, not having Jim Harbaugh on the sideline and still being able to beat your rival in the biggest game of the season is a testament to what this Michigan team is. They're not a flashy team like Washington that's going to impress you with a lot of amazing plays in the passing game or a lot of explosive runs, but they know what they are. And what they are a hard-nosed football team that's physical. And when you go up against Michigan, not only are you about to suit up for a 60-minute football game, but you're about to go to war. I mean, these dudes are tough. And Jim Harbaugh, before the game started, he said that this game was going to come down to the trenches. And it ultimately did. And Michigan won it by a landslide. The fact that Bama even was able to keep this thing close, even had a chance at winning this thing, was amazing because that offensive line was dog water, bro. Like, Nick Saban has to get that offensive line fixed. Michigan, without one of their best offensive tackles, who was an All-American, by the way, did a pretty good job at keeping J.J. McCarthy upright. You want to know why? Because they were able to be balanced. Alabama's defense didn't really know what was coming. Michigan, on the other end, you knew what Alabama was going to do. They were either going to run the football with Jalen Milroe or they were going to hand that thing on. And if they did anything else, you knew you were going to be able to stop it. Really disappointing to see Alabama get clobbered the way that they did. And the score says 27-20, but I truthfully believe that Michigan was the more dominant team from the jump. Like, once I saw the third offensive possession out of Alabama in this game, I knew Michigan was going to win. No way you can win this game giving up 6 sacks. Like, that's crazy. Michigan, I've slept on this team all season long. I doubted them against Penn State. They beat Penn State running the football 31 straight times. I doubted them against Ohio State. They proved me wrong in that game. And then I picked against them in this game against Alabama, and they proved me wrong again. They were the better team. I was wrong about that. What people were saying were actually true. Michigan doesn't rival Alabama in talent because of recruiting. But they rival Alabama in talent, and they were the better team in this game because of player development. A lot of these guys that Michigan has on their roster have been with this program for 3, going on 4 years. They got a lot of veterans on that team, and it was evident. Because no matter how big the moment got for Michigan, they never got rattled. Meanwhile, for Alabama in overtime, they just completely imploded on themselves, man. Like, that was an abysmal play call out of Nick Saban and Tommy Rees, bro. Like, I'm really disappointed in Nick Saban for that, for even allowing that to take place. And he even owned up to it after the game. He took responsibility for it. You expect more out of Nick Saban. But, you got to give a lot of props to Michigan for this win, man. Like, I'm not taking anything away from Michigan. This was a well-earned win. It could have even been a more impressive victory if you were able to clean up your special teams mishaps. But this was an incredible game. It was a great atmosphere. Somebody said that the Rose Bowl should be the home to the national championship. And I wouldn't be too opposed to that. Like, looking at the Rose Bowl on TV, it really makes me want to go to that shit. Next year, my goal is to save up enough money so I can catch a flight and make it to a Rose Bowl game. Rather it be a semifinal game, a national title game, or just a regular bowl game. I know people think that bowl games are still meaningless, but the Rose Bowl is peak college football. Because you know what college football is about? It's about tradition. It's about pageantry. And the Rose Bowl has an incredible atmosphere that embodies everything that what makes college football so great. And this was a great game, and it had an epic ending, man. Went to overtime. You got the 17-yard run by Blake Corum. He was running guys over. He was mauling guys to the ground. He didn't have 100 yards rushing, but he made some big catches. I mean, Blake Corum was somebody who I don't think got enough credit for how well he played in that game. And he's another Michigan player that has spent a lot of time with this program. He's a veteran. He's a leader in the locker room. And it seems like everybody on this Michigan team is a leader in their own right. But kudos to Jim Harbaugh for having this Michigan team ready to play for the first time. You know what they say, third time's a charm. And his third time in the playoffs, he finally found the way to get through. And I thought when they were down 2013, it was over for them. He was about to drop to 0-3. And we don't know about Jim Harbaugh's future. I want to see him back in the NFL. But if he stays at Michigan, this is still going to be one of the best run programs in college football, even with the sanctions. Like, people think that Michigan after this year isn't going to be able to shake back with the ramifications that they're going to have to deal with because of their sign stealing scandal. But with what they did this season, you know, having to overcome all that and having to tune out the noise, I'm not going to count out this program again. I expect them to be right back in the swing of things, especially with the playoffs expanding to 12 teams. And Ryan Day, I don't think this dude is going to have what it takes to end the streak against Michigan. Michigan is just way more tougher and way more physical than Ohio State and Penn State and the other teams in the Pac-12. Even when Washington and Oregon and USC arrived on the scene, you still have to be able to maintain a certain style of play if you want to have success in the Big Ten Conference. And what we saw Michigan do against Alabama, just bullying them and torturing them up front with their defensive line, their offensive line, that's something that we don't really see happen to Alabama very often. Normally, Alabama is on the opposing end. They're the ones playing bully ball. They're the ones who are imposing their will up front. But the Big Ten, this was a major victory for them. They proved to everybody that the SEC isn't the only conference that just runs college football. The Big Ten hasn't had a lot of success in this past year's bowl season against the SEC, but this was a major win for them because it showed you that you don't need to have great recruiting classes to be able to win. All you got to be able to do is recruit guys that fit what your culture is, what you want to build, and what you want the identity of your football team to be. And I don't think there's not a single team in college football that plays true to themselves than what Michigan does. And they perfectly embody the personality and identity of Jim Harbaugh. What is Jim Harbaugh? This dude is, he's gritty, he's tough, he's a little bit, weird at times. But I like Jim Harbaugh. And this Michigan team, they rally behind their head coach, and they've used this as motivation to get them to the national championship. And there's been so many times when Michigan this season has been down and out. It looks like they were going to be done, and they found ways to seek out wins. And this was another example of that. This is a tough-ass team, man. And even if you don't like Michigan and you don't agree with what they did when it comes to the whole cheating scandal or stealing signs, you still got to give your hats off to them and show respect for what they put on display in this game against Alabama. Because normally when you're down and out against Alabama, they smell blood in the water and you're not able to find a way to get a victory. Michigan, they were able to slay the giant that is Nick Saban in Alabama football in the college football semifinals. And this is only Nick Saban's second loss in the first round of the playoffs. He doesn't lose in the first round like that. There were people saying, oh, you got to watch out if you're Michigan, because you know what happens when you give Nick Saban, good old Nicholas Saban, a month to prepare. Well, Nick Saban had a month to prepare, and he didn't have a center that knew how to snap the ball properly. There were like 15 bad snaps in this game. And there were so many plays that possibly could have resulted in Jalen Milroe getting his head taken off and him having to lead the game with a damn concussion, bro. Like, some of his Jalen Milroe was taken in this game, I thought we was watching him get CTE right in front of us. Truthfully, bro, like, that offensive line was getting bullied. Like, that true freshman left tackle they had, Caden Proctor, he was getting worked. And it wasn't just him. I can't just single him out. Everybody on the offensive line was getting worked. Like, when is Alabama going to fix their offensive line problem, bro? This is like the third, fourth straight season this offensive line has sucked. I don't know, man, but this was a great game. Happy that we got blessed with seeing Michigan versus Alabama and not Michigan versus FSU. Like, before we move on, it kind of concerns me that people really thought that Florida State was going to be a better opponent for Michigan than Alabama. For all the people that are trying to say, man, Alabama losing just shows that FSU should have been here. No, the hell it doesn't, bro. Even with you being at full strength, you still would have lost this game. You weren't going to be able to handle the physicality of Michigan. You could barely beat Boston College and Miami. What makes you think that you would have been able to beat Michigan? Like, if you're going to use Alabama almost losing to Auburn in the Iron Bowl, then you got to have that same level of thinking with Florida State, bro. Like, I'm glad that we got Michigan versus Alabama, and it didn't disappoint. This game, what was best for business?